John D. Rockefeller Sr., Fueling the 20th Century by Dawson. John D. Rockefeller Sr. commanded such respect that even his greatest antagonist, Ida M. Tarbell, acknowledged his strengths. She once said, "Mr. Rockefeller was no ordinary man. He had the powerful imagination to see what might be done with the oil business if it could be centered in his hands." Rockefeller revolutionized the ways of doing business by creating a powerful corporate trust and a business model for large multinational companies. He applied the business model to the young oil industry, achieving unimaginable success. Rockefeller then utilized his wealth and applied the corporate trust into the world of philanthropy, creating a revolution equal to that in the business world. His Standard Oil was the stimulus behind the government's reaction, resulting in the Sherman Antitrust Act. John D. Rockefeller fueled the huge economic expansion of the 20th century. Rockefeller was born on July 8, 1839, in Richford, New York. Ever since his early years, his father constantly provided him and his brothers lessons that would ready them for a life of business. Early in Rockefeller's career, he moved into the risky business of commodity trading. In all of his endeavors, he probed for every mistake and miscalculation. And in his personal, thorough ledger, he recorded every single penny that he made, spent, or gave away. Rockefeller was a very religious man as well. When one of his Baptist ministers advised him to make as much money as he could, then give away as much money as he could, it became his lifelong goal. In 1859, John D. was given his big chance. Colonel Edwin L. Drake had struck oil in Titusville, Pennsylvania, and people were traveling from all over the country for instant riches. John D. Rockefeller realized that oil drilling was not a reliable way to make money. Production was very inconsistent and uncontrolled, and therefore the price of oil fluctuated constantly. He decided that refining oil was the way to go. In 1870, Rockefeller partnered with Henry Flagler, his brother, William, Samuel Andrews, and two other men to start what would arguably be the most prestigious, powerful, and revolutionary company in the world, Standard Oil. In the early oil industry, prices were never dependable because of the increasing competition and overproduction. From 1865 to 1870, the profit of refiners dropped from 20 cents a gallon to less than 8 cents a gallon. John D. Rockefeller knew that without a revolution in the industry, it would never stabilize itself. Therefore, he started his master plan to gain full control of the oil industry, control competition, and to make the most efficient company in the world. During this time, there were laws prohibiting multi-state companies, which was why, in 1882, Standard Oil created a revolutionary way to centralize its holdings through the Standard Oil Trust. The trust was a powerful corporation of corporations, which created a revolutionary business model.
He created the structure for the modern oil industry, and by doing that, he ended up helping to create the structure for most modern sort of capitalist industries. Hierarchical organization, careful attention to management, careful attention to where you were spending money, how you organized production, how you organized marketing and distribution.
John D. Rockefeller and 9 other associates ran the 41 companies involved with this trust. Standard Oil became so powerful that at one point it controlled over 90% of all oil refining in the world. Rockefeller had successfully revolutionized the oil industry and the way America did business, from freewheeling competition to loosely knitted cartels to airtight trusts. The day of combination is here to stay. Individualism has gone, never to return, he once stated. Rockefeller also revolutionized many aspects of running a business that, together with an effective corporate structure, made it the most efficient, profitable, and powerful company in the world.
One of the things he did was called vertical integration. That is, he believed in trying, when you're doing oil business, to control production, or at least the elements of production from the raw material stage to the distribution stage. Also, he would try to figure out the use for everything that was in a barrel of oil so that he got more out of a barrel of oil than anybody else.
John D. accumulated huge amounts of wealth through his oil empire. He became the first ever billionaire, with a net worth equal to 10 times the fortune of Bill Gates. The American people had always been afraid and distrustful of high concentrations of wealth and power, such as John D. Rockefeller and Standard Oil. Not only were the people fearful of his power, the government was as well, causing them to react. Finally, in 1890, government reform was enacted through the Sherman Antitrust Act. This act was created to prohibit business that would reduce competition in the market.
The role of antitrust, if you think about it, is to avoid abuses in a private enterprise system. If we have an economy that's run by the government, we don't need antitrust. You can throw it away because the government will regulate everything. You only need antitrust when you turn freemen loose and say go at it with each other. You've got to have some way to keep them honest.
Another key reaction came when Ida M. Tarbell, whose father was economically crushed by Standard Oil, unearthed significant details and many secrets about the inner workings of John D. Rockefeller and his company. Then, in 1902, she released a 19-part series in the McClure's magazine on Standard Oil that caused a huge public reaction. Following the passage of the Sherman Antitrust Act, there was no political will to prosecute trusts. Between 1898 and 1902, 198 trusts mimicking Rockefeller's business model were formed. It wasn't until Theodore Roosevelt came into power in 1901 and the closure of the McClure's magazine series that the government began to take on the trusts. Roosevelt singled out Standard Oil as the trust to bust and Rockefeller as the malefactor of great wealth. Finally, in 1911, the Supreme Court found Standard Oil guilty of violating the Sherman Antitrust Act and forced them to break up. The sheer size of Standard Oil was so enormous that more than 36 companies were formed, including Exxon, Mobil, Amoco, Chevron, Arco, and Conoco. The Sherman Antitrust Act continues to reform business even today. The United States antitrust laws are some of the toughest in the world and have been the basis for all antitrust prosecutions, such as those against AT&T and Microsoft. The significant public reaction to Rockefeller's wealth and power is mirrored today in the Occupy Wall Street movement. The public, known as the 99%, are fighting against the top 1%, or the Rockefellers and Standards of today. The top 1% of earners more than doubled their share of the nation's income over the period of 3 decades, and the 99% are demanding reform. Another revolution that emerged from John D. Rockefeller's great wealth was his philanthropic work. Rockefeller was always a very charitable man. He gave away money at an early age and increased his giving as his wealth increased. He now had such enormous wealth that finding good ways to give it away caused him great stress. In 1891, Rockefeller hired a Baptist minister, Reverend Frederick Gates, to help with his philanthropic work. Gates once told him, "Your fortune is rolling up like an avalanche. You must keep up with it. You must distribute it faster than it grows. If you do not, it will crush you, and your children, and your children's children." Under Gates, he applied his model of an efficient corporate trust through his foundation created in 1913. John D. Rockefeller once quoted, "Let us erect a foundation, a trust, and engage directors who will make it a life work to manage, with our personal cooperation, this business of benevolence properly and effectively." Equally as important as the benevolent trust was into which fields Rockefeller distributed his wealth. He set up permanent corporate philanthropies for the good of mankind that would give money to education, science, the arts, agriculture, religion, and even civic virtue.
The key to all that was he felt that it wasn't enough to just give the money. He really felt that you had to ensure that really important changes occurred. So he began to look not just on the surface of things, but what was causing the problem to begin with.
John D. Rockefeller was one of the most transformational figures in history. He created a revolutionary trust that reformed business and the oil industry. He then applied this model to philanthropy, revolutionizing the art of giving. His power and wealth created much reaction from the public, press, and government. Reform continues today due to Rockefeller's lasting impact. John D. Rockefeller Sr. truly was the man that fueled the 20th century.